Is traditional dog training failing our pets? What if there was a better way, one that taps into the emotional connection we have with our dogs? In this episode, I'm joined by Angie Winters, author of Don't Train Your Dog, as we explore why typical training methods might be causing more harm than good, and how we can become better dog parents instead of just trainers. Tune in to discover the keys to raising a happier, well-behaved dog by meeting their emotional needs and teaching them the right way without tricks. Stay tuned. You're listening to Starlight Pet Talk, a podcast for pet parents who want the best pet care advice from cat experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, and other top pet professionals who will help you live your very best life with your pets. Welcome to Starlight Pet Talk. I'm your host, Amy Castro. My guest today is Angie Winters, author of Don't Train Your Dog. For Angie, helping dogs is more than just a job, it's a calling. As a dog parenting coach and social entrepreneur for more than 20 years, Angie has obsessively studied, raised, and rehabilitated over 1,000 dogs and helped their parents. Her record for fixing broken dogs who were deemed unfixable by typical dog trainers, vets, medications, behavior experts, and even their own parents and sometimes rescues is unparalleled. Using a careful understanding of dog emotion and effective communication, Angie's cutting-edge dog parenting philosophy helps dog parents, rescues, and prison dog training programs nationwide. Angie has had dog parents drive from as far as California to seek out coaching at her Ohio home. Her mission is to create a world where dogs are understood and valued for their incredible gifts, leading to happier and healthier lives for both dogs and their parents. So, Angie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. So it's interesting that we're doing this topic because I just recently did an episode with Jennifer Holland, who wrote a book called Dog Smart, Life-Changing Lessons in Canine Intelligence. And it really got me to thinking about the many ways that our dogs are intelligent, but how many of those ways are very different in how humans measure intelligence. And I think that kind of tied over into certainly some of the things that you talked about in your book and the way that we, quote unquote, train dogs versus what I see it more as creating a relationship, establishing boundaries. So you had said in the book that you feel like society kind of misunderstands or basically underestimates the emotional complexity of dogs. So what do you think are some of the misconceptions that people have?
Yeah, I think they vastly underestimate the intelligence and the emotional entanglement that they are born with humans. So when people have a dog, and anybody who's had a relationship with a dog, they know how close they are. They know that their dog, already knows what they're going to do and can establish these routines and sometimes learns a routine in one repetition, depending on the outcome, or what they get, any kind of positive result. They learn that immediately, right? But it's a positive result from the interaction between the human and the dog. So dogs are born reading our facial features, and they're able to understand them. They're born with it. They don't learn this. Studies show they're born with it, which means they've kind of accepted us into their life, into their DNA. If they're born that way to look to humans and to pair with humans, basically, I say they're born to be family members with us because of this entanglement that they're born with and this dependency on us to be able to read our eye movements and finger pointing and say, to locate objects and to, navigate the modern world. So the problem is people are focused on this dog training mentality that we've all been raised with and taught. And, it's just on and on and on. I think people see constantly where that falls short, but yet we always just default back to that type of thinking of training a wild or domesticated animal. And you're trying to put this on a super highly emotional, intellectual being that's a family member. And then you're just trying to bring it all the way down to the simpleton, food in equals reaction out or fear in equals reaction out, when really the effective communication is already there. It's just that dogs know how to use it, but people don't know how to use that in order to guide their dogs into learning the proper family skills and safety rules and to fulfill them.
Yeah, I loved it in the book when you were talking about the fact that many of the things that we consider training are basically just like teaching them tricks. And one of the examples you gave was, you tell them to sit, you give them a treat. And it's like, it just got me to thinking like that. You're right. That's really no different than telling them to sit up and beg or telling them to twirl in a circle or play dead. You're giving a verbal, you're giving a reward, and they're doing and they're reacting, but, how does that translate into them not getting run over in the street when you want them to listen to you? And one of the hangups I always had with treat training is if it's so dependent on and I know that there is a place to use treats, but it's like, if that's the only way that you can get your dog to do anything, then what happens when you don't have treats on you when you're out and about? I mean, it's just like, that's always been a question in my mind for people who rely on those. You're going to carry around a pocket full of treats everywhere you go for the rest, for 14 years. Just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, and treats for me they're just the enrichment of the things that I'm already teaching them. It's the icing on the cake of things and, a way to go out of my way, catch them already making good choices and having good behaviors and to reward for that and encourage those states of mind and those actions and those feelings. But they do not do anything. I don't care. I don't care how anybody paints it. Everybody knows that you can help a dog that's a little bit unsure of an object or something that's just unsure of. Treats can help make them feel better about that, but they cannot undo fears. They cannot absolutely prevent fears. That's done by the relationship between the dog and the parent. And that trust and respect has to be there. But the dog training mentality in the dog training world, because it doesn't work, has tied parents' hands, and parents are just like immobilized. They can't figure out what to do. So half the time they don't do anything, or then they just lash out in anger because their hands have been tied, and they're just left with this. Well, it should work. Well, then there's something wrong with your dog. Well, then you didn't do enough repetitions. You didn't give the right treats at the right time at the what. And the reason why, and then everything goes off the rails. And then parents truly believe there's something is wrong with the dog, or something's wrong with them, and they're just not up to it. So, and I'm saying that these are parents who have given it effort. I mean, they give the effort. They want to do it. But if you have the wrong information, it's not going to ever work anyway. But it's made it seem like it's so hard to concentrate with or to communicate with a dog. It's so hard to teach them not to bite kids and not to run out the door. And it's really not that hard at all.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of it seems like you're kind of working with the natural, like some of the things that you talk about in the book, the example of training a puppy to only play with its own toys and the process. I don't want to give away the farm by sharing too much, but it's a process that you establish from the beginning. It's not something that you wait until there's a problem that they've eaten the legs off your furniture and they've been chewing all your stuff up for whatever months, that now you're going to fix that with training. It's establishing parameters just like you would with your own children. I mean, you don't train your children per se. You like, and I think the example that you give in the book, is great. It really got my mind changed about the idea of pet parenting because to be perfectly honest, I have a little bit of a hang up with how far sometimes people take this concept of pet parenting. And I want to get into talking about the humanization of dogs and how that kind of does them a disservice. I do want to talk with you about that. But I do like that where you talked about like, what is your definition of parenting? Can you explain that a little bit and how that translates not only to your children, but how that translates to your other family members, including your pets?
Right. So I think that the reason why I had the same feelings as you years ago, but like, as it explains in my book, I've been doing this for 28 years. So it's been an evolution, right? But it's, the first main learning phase has happened in like the first 5 years, 7 years. And then it was just refining to try to come up with these simple ways to use recipes and simple ways to guide dogs. So that became more solidified for me. And I felt perfectly fine calling it parenting because I realized that parenting was a more accurate description of what I was doing with these dogs when I was just bringing in dog after dog. And as we've talked about, I was just, only taking dogs into my house and over and over and over of the ones that nobody else was able to fix. Right. In this attempt to find solutions that I was just watching all these dogs suffer and lose their home. And I could see the lack of common sense in this dog training mentality of treats, sit, or fear, and neither one of those works. And so just a desperate attempt to find answers, I started bringing him in. And then as this process went on of me bringing him in and raising two kids at the same time, I realized, wait a minute, the only problem I have with calling parenting is when you use the word, this is my child, was first of all, they don't need to be a child in order to deserve parenting. Right? Just the fact that they're born entangled with us and they're dependent on us in our modern society means they are a family member in my mind, and they do deserve to be parented. They don't need to be a child in order to deserve that. But what people mistake that with is when they say this dog training doesn't work. And so they just kind of give up and say, he's my child. I'm just going to let him do whatever he wants because he's my baby. It's like, well, we don't let our child do everything we want anyway, because they're our baby either. They deserve to learn, and dogs deserve to learn the family rules and safety rules, and to be able to function and not be anxiety ridden, just as much as children do, because they're family members. But so I am parenting these dogs, I realize, because my definition of parenting is providing love, support, and guidance to vulnerable family members. Now, children are vulnerable, and they're 2 and 3, and they grow up and they're no longer that vulnerable anymore. So they don't need that kind of parenting that dogs in our modern society remain perpetually 2-year-olds. They're going to always need the guidance. So that's why I call it parenting, and why I feel comfortable with calling it parenting. And in fact, it's actually more accurate. And also, I realized if you get out of that dog training mentality, that's how you start realizing, oh, and they're like, oh, this just seems like magic. That just worked too easy. It can't be that easy. It's like, well, it is. When you have certain skills with children, this kind of thing. We know that this generally works with kids. This generally works with dogs. There is that commonality. So there's room for temperament, there's room for breed, there's room for all that, but there's still a common amount of guidance that works, that dogs understand, right? So it's got to be black and white, which is different. The timing of it's different. How you parent and give that guidance to dogs is very different than you give it to kids.
Agreed. But I think there's also, there's some of the things that you were talking about, like providing calm, consistent leadership and, not going to extremes of emotions one way or the other. I think that's the same with kids. I mean, I think kids can become immune to, first of all, negatively impacted, but also very immune to extremes in emotion or inconsistency. And then the next thing you know, they're running their own agenda. Cause I was like that even, as going into my teenage years, because my mom would say, well, you're not going to leave this house. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah,
and I would leave,
right.
and nothing ever happened. So
Right.
don't throw down that gauntlet. But it's the same thing. I see this a lot with people parenting their pets and their children. I mean, you see it in the grocery store, you see it in the restaurants, the threatening over and over and over again. We're going to get up and leave this restaurant if you don't do this. And we say it 50,000 times. Like, how about we say it once?
Mm-hmm.
And then we make it happen.
Right.
And therefore, ta-da, the kid will quickly learn. And it's the same. You gave the same or similar examples with dogs as well. I mean, do you see that as a huge issue with people working with their dogs, is the inconsistency?
I do. There's too many human words. I had to learn to not use so many words with dogs in my attempts to figure out what works with them. And then they taught me that works, facial expressions, which we talk about in the book. As just a parenting across the board for kids and dogs, say it once and then make it happen. And so where people trip up on that is they don't have a clear plan of actually how they're going to give that guidance, right? So human parents, if they have the knowledge, say, here's what I'm going to do, where I already think out the scenario, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be natural consequences. You remain emotionally neutral when you do it. Not that, parenting is parenting. Sometimes we're going to lose our temper a little or whatever. But if you have a plan and you have the actual tools in your toolbox that actually work and that you can do and you're confident about, then you can remain emotionally neutral when you're doing that. You have no chance of remaining emotionally neutral, which renders all your words and your everything ineffective if you cannot remain emotionally neutral. And so that's why my book goes into even all the way into, see the picture of this look on this person's face.
I love the pictures and the infographics in the book.
And people say, because it's got to be easy. It doesn't matter if you or I can do it. If parents can't do it, then dogs are going to continue to lose their homes. Dogs are going to continue to be in danger. Kids are going to be in danger. The shelters can't take anymore, right? The shelters, it doesn't work. There's only a few that get rescued. And even then, the amount, as you know, the time, effort, and money and the resources it takes to rescue one dog. And then when people don't have the ability to rehabilitate that dog, then they place it in. And when adoptions happen, many times they're unsuccessful. And then they come back and the dog has more problems. Now has more separation anxiety. Now it's labeled a biter. All that stuff is the reason why I wrote the book, because all that can be easily prevented and the behavior problems can be fixed.
Yeah. I think it's surprising to me. well, and maybe it shouldn't be, the things that people do that create the issues that they've got. You give examples of the play biting with your puppy and roughhousing with their face and encouraging them to do that. And it's like, it's all fun and games when it's maybe not so much fun and games because those baby teeth are pretty sharp, but when they're little and they don't have the bite power, but then when they're bigger and they still want to play the same way, now you've got a problem with it. And it's like, I think it's completely unfair to the animal and we've talked about this in several episodes. We talked about it in an episode where we talked with somebody who worked with people that were going to have a baby, and how do we, get the dog ready for the baby? And the way you get the dog ready for the baby is you decide how your life is going to be. And you mentioned it many times. You just mentioned it now and many times in the book. You don't just go into it, whatever it might be, the exercise or the practice or the scenario, you plan for it. And so it's like, if I know I'm going to not allow my dog to go into my baby's room, before the baby's even here, why do we even let the dog go into the room or to go upstairs? Like, create those boundaries early. We don't want the dog jumping on the baby on the couch or grandma when she comes to visit. Well, why do we let them do it all the other times? Like, it's there's only so much anybody can handle switching of the rules at a whim that they can't comprehend,
No. I mean, for dogs, there just need to be consistency. But the great thing about dogs is, they're capable of such dramatic change given a trusted, respected parental figure and this guidance. They're capable of incredible change, way faster than any human being can change, because they live in the moment. And as long as that trust there, and as long as their environment makes sense to them according to the natural wiring that they're born with, which, it's the way Mother Nature works. As long as you can replicate that in your house and in your parenting, dogs learn fast. But further, even beyond what you're saying, my goal is to empower parents with every recipe and every prescription that they need, and the perspective that they need, and all the tools they need to be able to have the dog be present with family members and have good behavior, have easy behavior, know when to be easy, know when to be calm, because they're born wanting to be included so badly, right? And so much of this typical dog training has failed, and it's really so sad, because then the dog gets chaotically removed from the room, or when people come over or whatever, and then they're shoved into the crate, which makes the crate horrible. And they become heartbroken and anxiety ridden, and they completely don't understand. They deserve to be able to be taught in a way they understand proper behavior that's safe and effective, so that they can be included. I mean, they deserve to be taught in a way that they understand. And the way that they understand is not typical dog training made up by humans, these words put onto dogs.
We'll be right back.
Our pets aren't in our lives nearly long enough. So isn't it important that we build the best relationship with them that we can? Let us help. Get our exclusive guide, 10 Tips for Building a Lifelong Bond with Your Pet, and start transforming your relationship today. Just go to petparenthotline.com/bond with your pet. Yeah. I love in the book when you talk about the 3 different ways that dogs tend to see people. And I think that's another thing that kind of correlates with human children too, right? So they either fear you, they basically blow you off, or they respect you. And I see that, you see that all the time. So you can be the aggressor and create that fear, or you can be, which I see probably even, well, it's interesting because you don't see the aggressor as much, because I don't think people are as bad about that in public, but you do see that permissive side of things, of basically letting them get away with murder. And it's rare that you see that respect, I guess, because it has to be earned. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah. And so dogs are, like I said, it's so much simpler with dogs, and the dog training world, typical dog training world, has made it seem like it's hard to earn the dog's trust and respect. So they do need to respect you, but they also need to trust you. So those things are equally important. So you can only get that by providing dogs firm guidance, but it's supportive guidance at the same time. So, I draw the analogy between the 3 different types of parentings that psychologists have determined for many years. So it's like a way to explain, you've got to hit that firm but supportive parenting, so that you're not to be feared and you're not to be dismissed. You are respected, but because you give respect back and you're treated in a way that, honors, what they're born with, and you educate yourself in a way that communicate with them in a way that they understand. And then it's like almost everybody I know, until they do this firm but supportive parenting and they approach it in the way that my book, Don't Train Your Dog, talks about, is that your relationship becomes so close and involved with this dog that you see its full personality, that most people are never seeing their dog's full personality. They're just seeing all these actions and reactions and fears, and the love is there. The love is, we're just entangled with dogs. I mean, dogs are our family. We're entangled with them. I don't see how that can be disputed at this point based on what we know about them. And they're capable of learning extremely high level thinking because of that attachment to us, right? So, and because they're partners with us. So that has enabled them to function at a much higher level than they probably would if they're just as themselves as an animal, So I don't think they're simply domesticated animals because they're born entangled with us. So I think they deserve to be treated as family members, but for people to learn the guidance that they need to function in our modern society and be fulfilled and happy. And so that every family member is safe. We teach children how to interact with each other so that they can be safe and we can walk out of the room without, the child hitting the other child over the head with a steel truck. It's like we approach that. We give the proper guidance. Consequences if needed, what will happen? We don't allow this. We can't do this. Here's a better way. That's supportive guidance. Still firm. I'm never going to allow the hitting, right? That's the firm part. But the supportive part is, here's what we can do different. Here's what's going to happen if we don't. Here's what we do with different. So it's providing a teaching moment. It's not providing punishment. Punishment is not learning. It's not a learning moment, providing punishment. Punishment is something that's done to kids or dogs after something has occurred in the hopes that will be, so harsh or negative that they will never want to repeat it. It doesn't truly teach them why we're doing this and why it can't be and what the alternatives are.
It's interesting because as you're saying that, so my real job, I shouldn't say real job, but the thing I actually get paid to do in life is I do communication training. And one of the things that I really focus on, and I'm actually starting a second podcast called Unapologetically Assertive, because people confuse assertive with aggression, like, that it's something to be feared, right? And to me, assertiveness is, finding that balance of getting along and getting things done, finding that balance of getting your message across, getting your needs met, but also respecting, and you've used that, that language as well, respecting the needs of the other being. And I think it's the same thing with our pets. If we think about it, that we are treating them with respect by creating those boundaries, by being consistent, by staying calm, and everybody's going to be better off in the long run. The other two extremes just set everybody up for failure.
Yeah. And it's like, I love my cat. I mean, I treat my cat with, respect, and, I can do some training with her, and, she wants to be with me, and, she's in the room with me like a dog all the time, follows me around, but she's not so emotionally entangled with me. It's easy to see that wild nature still exists there. There's only so much guidance you can give that. It does fall more into the realm of typical training if you're trying to teach her to do something.
Yeah.
With dogs, it's different because that emotional entanglement's there. The cat wants to be with me, but when I leave, she doesn't look out the
She
window,
doesn't cry and mourn your loss.
I don't have to prepare her to learn that it's okay when I leave. She's already like, yeah, don't let the door hit you, lady. But then when I come back, she's all over me, So to me, that's the difference in why I'm saying dogs need this firm but supportive guidance, more similar to children. They're not children. I don't think they're human children, but they still are a family member that deserves support and guidance and love. Love's already there. It's not like we have that much shortage of love for dogs. It's just that, I don't know, dogs learn things with typical training despite us, and we love them despite even the chaotic, and sometimes dangerous behavior that they have. We still love them. We're failing them by keeping up this typical dog training mentality. And like I've said, I am very direct about it. Like, I've been doing this for 28 years and there's no time. I mean, dogs need help. There's no time to beat around the bush about this, right? I was talking to a dog trainer and they saw my book and then they said, "You're very aggressive. Your language in the book is very aggressive about dog training."
I think it's just assertive.
And I said, I disagree. It's not aggressive at all. I don't feel aggressive towards you. I mean, there's some aggression here, but it's not coming from my side, but it's just direct.
Mm-hmm.
It's direct. Yeah. Why even say anything or write anything if it's not going to be real or direct? It's not aggressive. It's just real. And so I'm here for dogs, so I'm not here to get the typical dog training world's approval.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I think, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong on this, but having worked with terrible dog trainers and very well-intentioned and caring dog trainers, I also think that there's probably a certain element, like especially focusing on those who really do care and really do believe in what they're doing, is that if I, as a dog parent, hired a trainer and they taught me some techniques that seemed like they were working, and then they weren't working, I would probably be more likely to say it's something I'm doing wrong, or I haven't been consistent, or I'm just a big fat failure, or my dog is stupid, or my dog's just untrainable. And it's like, I wonder how many people go back and say, hey, none of that worked. My dog's still doing this. Or do they just kind of hide their heads? And so you don't know what you don't know. It's kind of like in rescue, you rescue a dog, you adopt it out, or a cat, or whatever it might be. And, for many years, I would follow up with every single one. And then after a while, you realize no news is good news, because do you really want to know how it turns out? Because, unless they want to give it back, there's not much I can do about it if they've already put it to sleep or if they gave it away or whatever. So people don't go out of their way to tell you, oh, I gave that dog away, or, oh, I decided I didn't like that dog, so I, had it euthanized, or the dog turned out, they don't come back and tell me that. So I would have no way of knowing that. So,
Right. I mean, it's the shame. It's the shame. No, and I believe also, I agree with you. Many dog trainers have their hearts in the right place and they're trying, but anything that I've never been able to fix and anybody else did something with some dog, I would say, how'd you do that? What'd you do? What'd you do? Like, that's how I've learned all this, right? Is just by pure inching ahead, finding one piece of information, putting it together with another piece of information until I could see the whole picture and I could finally see. But I mean, lucky or unlucky, I've had the experience that has been rescue training. I can train dogs. I can train dogs to do tricks, and I can train dogs. They've been on television and print ads. I mean, I can do all that stuff, but that doesn't teach family skills and the things that dogs need in order to stay in their home and to be fulfilled and for there to be happy families. And it doesn't give parents the information they know. What I see the fault in it is shows and books making it appear they water things down and they tend to make things appear like they're more effective than they really are. And then it's entertainment. It's entertainment.
yeah. So obviously there's a lot of, you use the term recipes, which is easy to relate to, easy to understand. And it also, I think it makes it less daunting to say there is a recipe. Like it's, you follow the recipe and you're going to get what you get. You don't follow the recipe, you're going to get something else, which is why my daughter does all the cooking for our household, because
Yeah.
I am not a good recipe follower. I'm not a good measurer. I don't, it's like, just, eyeball it. But I love the what's not allowed process and the 4 steps or 4 parts of that recipe, because it's such a simple but brilliant way to look at. And again, it's that setting that foundation. It's like, what are the things that are not allowed? And then here is the plan for enforcing those boundaries. So could you just give us a quick overview of that?
Yeah. So the hardest part has been making it simple. So, that was extremely the hardest part, was to make it simple. But I knew it had to be done, and it can't just be simple. It also has to work. So to make something that works and simple, I decided to eventually, I just formed these recipes to teach skills, teach the family rules and teach skills, and then prescriptions for fixing fear and aggression and things that parents are going to come up against. It's just true. So, and then I have a crate recipe, perfect potty recipe, and for all aspects. So I came up with this what's not allowed recipe, because dog after dog, regardless of the problem that it came to me with, my parenting was always the same. And so the dog's problems were all different. And so I started honing these set of techniques that what things actually work on all of them, regardless of their issues. I mean, I saw some weird things that I never thought would even exist, and just heartbreaking things. And then the fact that I could bring them all the way back and find a set of techniques and approaches and perspectives that works with all of them, then I said, I have to figure out a way then to get this down into a simple recipe or communication form that parents can use. Everybody can, rescue folks. So the what's not allowed recipe is so I can touch on it instead of going into the exact details, because the 2 chapters are before that, simple chapters, but they have to set the stage and the parental perspective in order to effectively realize why you're doing this recipe. And it's literally has 4 steps. So I help parents easily see the guidance moment. right? So you got to see the guidance moment, and you learn, and you see that by you start to learn what the dog is doing or feeling, or lift one front paw, it's unsure, just a set of techniques that's easy to read, not some complicated dog body language chart, right? Just a set of things that you're going to see in your dog. So, this typically happens. They'll see this, and learning to recognize that point early to give early guidance, because it's extremely effective. Then by empowering them with the recipe, they're not afraid to go ahead and start the recipe, because they've got this tool in their back pocket. So see the moment that you need to approach the dog, right? And then disagree, give the what's not allowed guidance, which is, we don't do that. There's 5 ways to show that you can do it with your facial expressions, with your body language, a little bit of vocal, displacing them, or use a combination or any one of those that works on your dog and how dogs see it. But then the critical part that dog training misses is that once you give this guidance, this what's not allowed guidance, long enough, okay, and it usually only takes first time something, and even in a bad case, it could take 1 minute, which is only 60 seconds. But then parents usually do it for like 4 seconds, and they go, that didn't work. You hold this guidance, keep on, blocking or holding until they look to you. And when this is critical, this eye contact, right? So then you hold it long enough that you hold that eye contact then for 1/1000. They don't just glance at you and you hold it 1/1000 to let it sink in, because dogs need that moment of guidance, that clear guidance to let it sink in. Otherwise, it's just a distraction. Here, go to this. They're not really learning. This is by the way they learn in nature, is to actually to hold that eye contact, and then, but here's what you can do. And then you just bring in this full excitement. Here's what you can do in this time or this area. Here's what I want you to do. And then you do the action with them, so that, this is a great thing. You just overplay this ending part, right? But you're very firm about the other part. Very firm. That's never going to happen. It's never going to be allowed. And then once you convey this, run through this recipe, if you have to run through it again, you just hold the eye contact just a little bit longer. It's not staring your dog down angrily. You're not pointing at your dog. It's I just know that dogs pay attention to that. There's room for adjusting it to your dog's temperament, your dog's breed, age, everything. It doesn't just work on puppies, and it doesn't just work on older dogs. And it doesn't work on certain breeds. It doesn't work on just males and not females. All that stuff is not something to concentrate on. The breed comes into play with fulfillment, and what they want to do and fulfilling those drives. That comes in fulfillment, but not for guidance. You may have to bring a higher level, but that's just the dog's wiring.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it along the same lines as, let's say you've got the fireplace going, right? And you see your kid heading over there, and it's like, okay, you already know they're going to be up to no good. Like we were over here doing something else. You see the kid heading over there. It's like, would you wait until they stuck their hand in the fireplace? Or do you realize at a certain point that there is a point where you want to get that attention, and noticing that behavior? Do you want to do it when they're halfway across the room heading there? Maybe not. But once their intent is fairly obvious, and you get to know that, you get to know how your kid operates. And I think it's the same thing with your pet. My Doberman was very dog reactive. When you're going to go out to the park, you're going to run into a dog. And when you see that dog 50 yards away before your dog even sees it, without creating anxiety, because you got to be careful about that, but, be prepared to implement the steps.
Right. And you won't create anxiety. You won't create anxiety when you're emotionally neutral.
That's right, because you're prepared for what's getting ready to happen, and you have a process in place.
Right. And what you just talked about, Amy, I'm glad you said that, was because that's a perfect example of early guidance, and how much it's so much more effective early on than you still have to address it. If you've missed the guidance moment, it's already happening. You still have to address it while it's happening. You still have to do something, and then make sure everybody's safe, and then just make your plan for how you're going to give earlier guidance next time. So yes, I mean, people are like, they stand there and watch their dog, and they watch their dog. And it's like, if you already see, if a dog already does this and looks right at something, it's like right then. Right? That's early guidance. And it's so effective. It's like, don't wait for them to be aggressive over the other dog. If you already know your dog has that, and they learn so much faster that way. They're like, oh, okay, that's never going to be allowed. They start realizing when you're very consistent, like, just even several repetitions of being consistent with something, and your attitude is perfectly neutral, like, This is never going to be allowed. I know what I'm going to do each time you try that. They start believing in a dog world, something is always allowed or never allowed, right? It's when you start mixing those things up for them that's all that chaotic behavior. And they're like, it just seems to come out of nowhere. It's like, it never comes out of nowhere. It's either for dogs, you have to completely convince them that it's never going to be allowed. But if you bring frustration and fear to it, they will not be learning that. They'll only be learning about what the hell, what's going on? What are you doing? Like, what is this about where my paw was now? Or is this necessarily about what I was? You cannot bring any frustration. Plus they just half the time they just either fear you or dismiss you if you bring this anxiety and
kind of out of control energy that's coming at
they
them.
just dismiss you or they become fearful of you. They don't trust you. So, but once they trust you and everything, and you just keep bringing this with emotional neutral things, which is why I put the human faces in the book, like, go into a mirror and look at this human face. You might not think you're making that face, that you have to make sure that you're what your emotionally neutral face looks like. And that right there is golden. Like, it gives you literally you're 50% there when you realize that, how to keep emotionally neutral, give the guidance. And then the dog, pretty soon, it's like, they just realize this is never allowed. So then it's just exactly how when they get into a routine and they want to do the same thing at the same time with the same stuff, whatever, you just make them believe this is the routine. This is how we do it.
Yeah. And I love giving them that alternative. And that works with kids too. It's like, you can tell kids no, 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 no. But if you redirect them to doing something else, especially if you're like, hey, let's work on this puzzle, or hey, let's make some cookies, or come help me stir the salad that I'm making, whatever it is, it's like, it's engaging. And so it becomes much more enticing and interesting than whatever it was that they were getting ready to go do.
Right. I mean, and when you're giving that parental guidance and providing those alternatives to kids, they can understand a little more gray. They can understand a little more subtle, like, yeah, I mean, sometimes it seems like that was unfair that they were doing that to you, but really, there's nothing you can do about that. All you can do is control your own thing. And so it's better to make this choice instead. You can give them that kind of guidance, as they get older too. You can give them more words and more, past and present, guidance. Dogs, it's always black and white in the moment, or they can't learn, right? So those are the main differences in parenting, giving guidance to dogs and kids. So they both deserve to have it in the way that they understand, right? And so, what you were saying about the alternative, a big problem with typical dog training is they're like, yeah, we give them the alternative, but the alternative is distraction with a treat. Right. So they think they're giving them an alternative. Look to me for that stuff, even with a highly food driven dog, wears off fast for most of them. And they don't completely understand. It's an incomplete teaching moment. Just to say no as an incomplete teaching moment, you got to provide the yes, but also to do it fast and to say, here's a distraction is not a teaching moment. It's just a distraction. That's all it is.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. So is there a particular, whether it's your own personal experience or a pet parent coming back and using these techniques, like a success story that you would share that jumps out? I know you've had many, but any in particular that jump out as being memorable?
One of the cases I had was with a dog named Junior, because he's kind of like famous around here and everything they went through in the rescues. And he'd gone through trainer after trainer and, tear apart crates and could, end up being put to sleep or being housed in a kennel to be a vet's kennel to be a blood donor for the rest of his life. There was just nothing, no trainer. So then they contacted me, but I was very busy with other dogs and I was, doing cases that were just as bad. I could only do so many at a time with my also raising two kids.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't get him. Well, in the meantime, obedience trainer took him to boot camp for 2 weeks and said that he had gotten rid of his dog aggression and then he could now be adopted. Well, then as soon as he went back and was at any adoption event or whatever, all the things came back. But when he was around that trainer, he was so afraid of that trainer that he didn't attack the trainer's dogs, but he still didn't learn that he couldn't attack any other dogs. It was just fear. And then I couldn't even, by the time I got him, I couldn't use a leash or anything because he was afraid of a raised hand, a leash, everything. So there you got that side of the strict obedience, right? We're going to cure this dog aggression. Right. Well, then when I figured out his exact thing was that he was, it was anxiety and he was, he had just gotten completely off track and he would just constantly listen for these tiny noises. To be like loud noises wouldn't even bother him. I mean, he's just in this loud kennel environment forever. So he's listening for like little, like when the water would go into the ice cube trays in the thing, or the house would creak in the wind a little bit, just like You just freeze. It was all these freezing moments. So I undid that. I got that, just said, by providing the firm but supportive parenting, we don't, don't pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to that. Here's what you can do. Don't pay attention to that. Here's what you can do. On and on. Now it's more extreme. Typical parents aren't going to have cases like this. He was
Right.
unadoptable. He's just extreme. So 24 hours constantly. Let's do this. No, let's do this. But what had created this initially was all positive, only use treats and distractions. So that had created this aggression. And then that's one side, which created one problem. And then the obedience trader created the other problem.
The opposite extreme, yeah.
Yeah. And so within this case typically took me 2 weeks to fix a dog and get it adoptable. And this, I think he took 3 or 4 weeks. It was an extreme case. But I point out that and tell his story. And you can see video with the digital companion that runs to the book on my website. And I point that out because it shows how neither one of those typical dog training things work. And they cause problems. But the firm but supportive parenting in this book is what cured him.
Yeah, I mean, that it requires a level of dedication that I think, it kind of goes back to picking the right dog for yourself or pet, but also knowing, am I ready for a pet? Am I ready to put in this level of work or level of dedication? It's the same, it's the same with any kind of parenting. Are you ready to be a parent or are you not? Are you ready to do
Absolutely.
it 24/7 kind of thing? Do you have the time or the bandwidth to do it? So let's talk about where people can get the book and just because that was something that I thought was a unique feature is that QR code in the book where you can get that because it's really easy to kind of read and skim a book. It's another thing to work through like exercises and a workbook. And I think that's such an advantage to have that companion. First, let's start with where's the best place for people to get the book and we'll put links up in the show notes.
Yeah. So the best, I don't know if you have the front cover, but the Don't Train Your Dog. It's at Amazon. You can get it at Amazon. And our website is parentingfordogs.com with the number 4, Parenting for Dogs. And the book has the QR code, as you mentioned, in the introduction. And so you can totally learn everything you need to learn in this by reading the book, just with text. But to add a level of understanding or something like, I'm not quite sure, exactly how I would do that with my dog, then they can scan this QR code and there's a digital companion that exists at parentingfordogs.com that has, and you get free access to that with the book. And then it has the companion videos that show me doing it and show dogs doing these things in real life. They've been recorded over the years of me working with dogs. So you can watch the videos that go with the chapters of the book if you want to. You don't have to. You may want to go back and redo them. You can watch that digital companion forever. Anytime that you feel like you want to, let me see that dog body language again. When she said, here, the video will stop and it'll say right here, see what he's doing there. It gives you a level of understanding that's pretty comprehensive. And then also the recipes and the charts or anything that you might want to remind yourself of there's free downloadables of that. You can put them on your refrigerator, hang them on your wall when you're working a recipe. Oh, yeah. That's the 4 steps that I want to keep focusing on.
Yeah. And I think the graphics are so great because to me, especially if you have older children in your home, it's just as important that they're consistent with these behaviors as well. And they're probably not going to sit down and read the dog book. It's like, but if you had the 4 steps, or this is what we're working on this week, and, make sure you do this when you go out the back door every time when you go out with Bluey or whatever the case may be. Well, Angie, thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and just a whole nother way to look at not training our dogs, but, living life with our dogs and living it in a way where it's a quality of life for us and for them. And I think that, on one hand, I think it's very empowering for me as a dog parent or a dog owner or whatever you want to call yourself. But it also is very freeing in a lot of ways because I start thinking about the fact that my dogs, I don't think I have a dog in the house that knows heel. But they walk nicely on a leash. They come in when I tell them to come in from outside. They stop barking when I tell them, you know what I mean? It's like, they're living life in the way that I need them to live it. And also I think we're meeting their needs for, enrichment and living lives the way that dogs should be living lives as opposed to humans.
I can't imagine living without that dog family member. And the reason why you have that is because you concentrated on the things that were important for family life, which is don't run out the door in front of trucks or after other dogs. Don't bite kids. You concentrated on teaching those instead of obedience.
All right.
tricks,
Right, yeah.
tricks or obedience.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, thank you so much for being here, and we'll put the notes, the show notes. We'll have links so that people can get access to the book and all the resources that you have available for them. So we really, really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on and your efforts towards dogs. Thank you.
Thanks. And to everybody, like I say every week, thank you for listening to another episode of the show. Be sure if you've got anybody in your life that is bringing a dog into their home or is experiencing some issues with their dog, this book will give you a completely different way of looking at how to not only create good relationships, but fix problems along the way. So make sure that you share this far and wide, and we will see you on another episode next week. Thanks for listening to Starlight Pet Talk. Be sure to visit our website at www.starlightpettalk.com for more resources, and be sure to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss a show. If you enjoyed and found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate a rating on Apple. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would be great too. Don't forget to tune in next week and every week for a brand new episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a big hug from us. Thanks for listening to Starlight Pet Talk. Be sure to visit our website at starlightpettalk.com for more resources, and be sure to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss a show. And hey, if you like this show, text someone right now and say, I've got a podcast recommendation. You need to check this show out, and tell them to listen and let you know what they think. Don't forget to tune in next week and every week for a brand new episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a big hug from us.